take it away.
All right, thanks, Joe. And yeah, like you said, it is very encouraging to see that the industry is moving so quickly over to network video. And by 2014, they expect more than half of the installations to be network IP video, which is really remarkable as far as the quick growth. But there certainly are still people out there that are still embedded in the analog market. That it's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with, and just some education to help people to understand the network advantages is what we're going to do today. So we've broken it, or I broken it into these three main topic areas. The first being image quality, the second being single cable structuring, and then the third being flexibility. And so there's reasons within each one of those three topic areas that we're going to discuss.
Okay.
As far as the image quality goes, there's several things within image quality, and the first thing to talk about is that with image quality, one of the things that you encounter in the analog world is loss of signal due to things such as attenuation and dispersion. With an analog camera, you go through signal conversions in order to convert it first from analog to digital inside the camera. Then it converts it also from digital back to analog to transfer the signal across the coax to a DVR system, where they convert it back into a digital system signal. And again, the disadvantage with this is that whenever you do a signal conversion, you end up with signal loss, and the signal loss is going to mean less image quality. So with an IP camera, there's one conversion that takes place. When you initially receive the signal to the camera, it converts it from an analog wave into an IP signal, into a digital signal, and sends it across the network. So there's only one conversion. So that results in much less loss of signal. And also with IP, if you add other protocols such as TCP guarantees delivery of the packet, which means that you don't end up with any loss of ones or zeros. So you get the same image quality from when it leaves the camera to when it's received at the viewer, no matter where it is in the world. So it's much better signal quality. One of the other drawbacks with coax is that the longer the coax, the more loss you have of signal. And you also end up with problems such as mismatches in grounding that can also be problems with coax cable. So with IP, you're dealing typically with Ethernet, copper twisted pair, and you have a 328-foot distance limitation, which is a standard, which makes sure that you don't end up with any signal loss. Of course, the disadvantage there is that you have to have a repeater every 328 feet, but with an IP installation, that's very typical of a building structures to have switches and routers within 328 feet of the cameras or of the users. So it's not really a disadvantage. Besides that, another reason for networking cameras is megapixel resolution. So higher resolution cameras means more information, more detailed images than you can get with analog. With an analog camera, the maximum resolution is typically 0.4 megapixel, or around 400,000 pixels of information for a SIF image. So with this much information, it makes it more difficult to do things like analytics, facial identification, and license plate recognition, and just to get an overall good image. The third reason, as far as image quality goes, is progressive scan as opposed to interlay scan. With analog cameras, you're doing an interlay scan to send the image from the camera to the recorder or to the server. And an interlay scan sends half the lines of resolution at one time, and then the other half the lines of resolution several milliseconds later. So there's really no problem as far as doing a live view. You don't see that with the naked eye. The problem with an interlay scan is when you go and look at a recording and you do a freeze frame to look at an individual frame to get more information. That's when you see the drawbacks of interlace scan. And at that point, you start to see motion blur. So if there's anything moving in the scene, it ends up looking blurry with interlace. With progressive scan, the way that IP cameras work, with progressive scan, it sends the whole image all at one time, and so you don't end up with any motion blur when you try and do a freeze frame on a recorded image. So that's very important, of course, in most cases, because if you have, for instance, a suspect that's running by a camera, you certainly would like to be able to freeze the frame and get a snapshot of the suspect, and it's going to be very difficult to do that with an analog camera. And moving over to a single cable infrastructure. So with cabling, with an IP camera, you have the ability to use basically one cable to do the work of many cables that you do with an analog camera. So that, of course, is going to reduce your installation costs, the amount of possibilities of outages and so forth. So the first one would be audio. With IP cameras, you can pass your audio signals from your camera across the same cable that you're also passing your video traffic on. So you reduce the need for having audio cables. And that can be two-way audio, both listening and speaking. Also, PTZ controls can be sent across the Ethernet. So there are the PTZ controls, which in an analog camera would be a separate controller, a separate cable going to the DVR. That's all going to be encoded with an IP camera and sent across the Ethernet. So it goes in the same stream, which means it's going to be synced with your audio traffic and so forth. Also, you can send power across your Ethernet cable. So with IP cameras, you don't have to have a separate power source. No need to put in an AC or DC connection for the cameras, which of course makes the cameras more flexible, more cost efficient, and easier to install. And then finally, flexibility. As far as flexibility, we have several things in this area too. So first of all, one of the things with IP cameras is that they're standards based, and being standards based makes them much more compatible with building a system consisting of a camera, an NVR system, a storage system. Those are all standards based with IP, which means that you're going to be able to work with other vendors' equipment, build the system that you need, big or small. It also makes it much easier to integrate with other systems like your point of sale systems, your building management systems, building access systems. Because you're standards based, you can, again, integrate with those systems much easier than you can with an analog camera.
Okay.
Remote access is another one. With an IP camera, it's easy to set up an IP camera at a remote location and still get it access to that camera from a central location. So typically, with an analog camera, you can get that digitized and through your DVR. You can get an IP connection, but you'd have to have a local DVR for that camera in order to get remote access to it. With an IP camera, that ability is built right into the camera. So you just connect your IP camera to your router, and you're able to access the camera from anywhere, again, in the world.
Nice.
So that's 10 reasons. A couple more would be wireless cameras. So having wireless capabilities built into the camera is much more flexible. Also, having the intelligence built into the camera. So cameras that are IP basically have their own built-in computers, their own processing power. So you can do analytics right on the camera and reduce the cost and overhead on your servers. And also you can get better analytics because having the analytics done right at the source means that you have pre-processed information, which is going to be the best information.
Andy, that all sounds very good. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you done with those points?
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. All right. That's terrific. I was wondering, can you expand a little bit? Here in New York City, we talk about the ring of steel. And first of all, we're at the end of our recording. I want to thank you for coming on the program. All right, and that'll end the recording. But